Welcome back to another episode of Capital Recap, a sports show where I walk you through the games and scores from around the DMV, including why Maryland is one of the best teams in the nation, at least according to a certain defensive category. Kicking things off with the Buffalo Bills blowout of the Washington Commanders 37-3. I think star wide receiver Terry McLaurin summed this one up pretty well, just saying it came down to not taking advantage of scoring opportunities, and I think that's pretty much correct. We'll start with the failed fourth down conversion when the Commanders were only trailing 10-0. You score right there, whether it's taking the field goal or just punching it in the end zone, and it's a one-score game. It's 10-7 or 10-3. I'll give them the field goal. I'll say it's 10-3. And then by halftime, they only trailed 16-0. So they were in this game for the majority of the game. They only trailed 16-0, even entering the fourth quarter, and we'll get to that in just a second. But a terrible game, the worst start of Sam Howell's career. A week after probably having the best start of his career, his first game without any turnovers, he turned the ball over 4 times, including some costly turnovers. An end zone interception, another one of those opportunities that Terry McLaurin was talking about, just not taking advantage of scoring opportunities. And then the pick six that we're all talking about right now is just like, what was he thinking on this play? And even more embarrassingly, he just gets shoved to the ground and just not a good showing. But overall, the turnovers really hurt in this one. 5 turnovers after I already mentioned the 4 Sam Howell interceptions. And if you're counting the turnover and downs, it's actually 6 turnovers. But Antonio Gibson, once again, fumbling. This really confuses me. This is a guy that didn't turn the ball over at all in his college career. And then all of a sudden the NFL, obviously against better competition, just has a turnover problem. Right after the Commanders got that fourth down stop of the Buffalo Bills heading into the fourth quarter, Daron Payne deflected Josh Allen's pass. The very next play, Antonio Gibson, just trying to do too much, spinning out of tackles, gets the ball poked free, and that led to the Buffalo Bills touchdown, and I pretty much think that was the end of it. A lot can be said about the defense's showing in this game, but in my opinion, I think they did a tremendous job. They only allowed 3 touchdowns. Of course, the garbage one at the end of the game. But the first 2 touchdown drives were only 35 yards. Of course, that was the huge play to Gabe Davis. And then a drive of 31 yards. And factoring out the 64-yard drive that led to the touchdown, I thought they played really well. They allowed 387 yards, 20 overall first downs, and 9 third down conversions. A quick aside, the Commanders only capitalized on 1 third down, so that probably also hurt. But I thought defensively they did a good job. Kendall Fuller had the interception, and up until the end, they only allowed 2 defensive scores. To save a little bit of face, the Commanders scored a garbage time field goal to avoid the shutout, but they'll try to do better next week as they travel to face the Philadelphia Eagles, their first division game of the season. Across the Beltway, it was a very confusing game for the Baltimore Ravens, falling to the Indianapolis Colts 22-19 in overtime. Following a rushing touchdown on the Ravens' opening drive by Lamar Jackson, it went all downhill from there. A fumble, a punt, a fumble, and another punt. And as bad as the first half was for the Ravens, it really came down to just being a terrible second quarter. A total of 2 net yards in the second quarter, and if you exclude the 14-yard play on the final play of the half, negative 12 yards in the second quarter. Surprisingly, the Ravens were only down 10-7 entering halftime, but following the break, it was more of the same, a punt on their first 2 drives, and then finally Lamar Jackson, doing it all himself once again, finds the end zone on his second rushing touchdown of the game. Without Lamar Jackson, I don't know what kind of game this would have been. Of course, sloppy conditions thanks to Tropical Storm Ophelia, and the Ravens were without Odell Beckham Jr. and without Rashad Bateman for a little bit of time, but bad game overall. Despite all that, they still had a really good chance to win. Jordan Stout, an amazing punt, 53 yards, pinning the Indianapolis Colts at their own 2-yard line. And a few plays later, Gardner Minshew runs out of the back of the end zone for the Ravens safety, a la Dan Orlovsky, if any of you guys remember that. But Ravens get the ball back after the free kick following the safety, and they couldn't do anything. They couldn't capitalize off of that. The Indianapolis Colts, amazing defense, credit them for that. And they drive the field, and Matt Gay kicks one of his 50-plus yard field goals to send it into overtime. Sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit. To tie the game, potentially sending it to overtime. Justin Tucker, of course, missed a 61-yard field goal, only his second missed game-winning field goal in the fourth quarter or overtime in his career. And I have the amazing distinction of being at the other game in which he did that. 2018 against the New Orleans Saints, I was there with my brother. I was telling everybody around me, Justin Tucker never misses in this situation. And what did he do? He missed, and the New Orleans Saints won that game. And I did not hear the end of it. With that, the Ravens headed to overtime, and after they lost the coin toss, I thought it was a wrap. Of course, the NFL changed its rules, allowing both teams to get a possession in overtime in the playoffs, but this was the regular season, so after that coin toss, I thought it was pretty much over. But the Ravens defense held the Colts to a 3-and-out, and they got a chance of their own. Inexplicably, after Devin Duvernay's 31-yard punt return, the Ravens couldn't do anything with it, and instead of sending Justin Tucker out there to try again, once again, probably because of the sloppy conditions due to the rain and because Justin Tucker missed that field goal earlier, but they didn't trot him back out there and went for it on fourth down, and it was kind of the back and forth thing that we saw a couple times in the overtime until Matt Gay, with his historic fourth field goal of over 50 yards, gave the Colts the win. That was set up by this very sketchy play in which Zay Flowers was possibly interfered with. I'll let you be the judge right here. But overall, tough loss for the Ravens. Next week, they'll travel to face the Cleveland Browns. In college football, Maryland spoiled Michigan State's homecoming and came home with the 31-9 win, marking their first win on the road against Michigan State since 1950. That stat is, of course, a little misleading since they've only played 4 times since 1950, more specifically only 4 times since 2015, a year after Maryland started playing in the Big Ten, and they were 0-4 in that span. So, still impressive that they got the win, although not the same Michigan State team, as they're dealing with a little bit of scandal if you haven't heard. As for the stat I teased in the opener, Maryland forced 5 turnovers in this game, making it 9 in their past 2 games and 11 overall this season, which is second best in the entire nation. And even if you're looking at their turnover margin, which is 11-3, 11 turnovers forced, 3 against, that's still tied for second best in the nation. Offensively, Maryland is still getting it done, leading the Big Ten in total offense with 1,802 yards. Next up, they'll host Indiana in their second Big Ten game of the season. I'll make quick mention of Colorado's 42-6 loss at the hands of Oregon, just to correct a factual error that I stated last week, saying it was their first matchup against a ranked team. Of course, TCU was ranked in the first matchup of the season, but Colorado wasn't, and what I really meant was that this was their first matchup against a ranked team while they're also ranked. They fell to Oregon, as I said, 42-6. Deion Sanders summed it up, calling it a good old-fashioned butt-kicking. Colorado falls out of the top 25, no surprise there. I think they'll eventually find their way back. They have another ranked opponent next week in USC, but Shedeur Sanders just had a rough time of it. His offensive line didn't want to protect him. He didn't have his weapons, really. Of course, no Travis Hunter. Jimmy Horn Jr. was held in check for most of the game, and that does it. Good old-fashioned butt kicking. Moving on to baseball, where the Baltimore Orioles won on Sunday, defeating the Cleveland Guardians 5-1. They split the 4-game series with the Guardians and finished the road trip with a winning record, 4-3, starting the road trip in Houston, finishing it, of course, in Cleveland. And with the Rays losing to the Toronto Blue Jays, the Orioles' magic number for clinching the AL East drops down to 3. That means they need to win 3 more games or have Tampa Bay lose 3 more games, or a combination of the two, to clinch the AL East. While the Baltimore Orioles just finished up a 7-game road trip, the Washington Nationals just finished up a 7-game homestand. They went 3-4 over that time, 2 wins against the Chicago White Sox, 1 against the Atlanta Braves out of a 4-game series against the Braves, splitting Sunday's doubleheader after Saturday was rained out thanks to Tropical Storm Ophelia. Going back to Friday's game against the Braves, Ronald Acuna Jr. hit his 40th home run of the season to become the 5th player in MLB history to have a 40 home run, 40 steal season, and the first since, I want to say 2005 or 2006, when Alfonso Soriano did it for the Nationals. Next up, the Nationals will travel to face the Baltimore Orioles in my favorite series of the entire baseball season, the Beltway Series. And from baseball to the pitch, where DC United was downed by the New York Red Bull 5-3, overshadowing Christian Benteke's first MLS hat trick, all done in the first half. The loss snapped DC United's 4-match unbeaten streak, which spanned the stretch of the month of September, and they also fell out of the playoffs, falling to 10th on the table after New York City FC was victorious on Sunday. DC United has 1 less game than the rest of the MLS after, of course, expansion saw MLS add a 29th team, meaning there are not an even number of teams to play all on decision day. Still, there are 3 games remaining for DC United, their next being an away match in Vancouver. As they say in hockey, let's do that hockey. It's hockey season. The Capitals started their preseason with a 4-3 shootout loss to the Buffalo Sabres. They lost 2-1 in the shootout. Nicholas Aube-Kubel and Sonny Milano are the 2 regulars that scored goals. Sonny Milano scored shorthanded. He was also the only Cap to score in the shootout. Hendrik Lapierre and Dylan Strome were both denied in the shootout. This was the first of 6 preseason games as the Caps build up to their season opener against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Last but not least, the Washington Mystics were eliminated from the playoffs after falling to New York Liberty last Tuesday, 90-85 in overtime. This game really came down to rebounding. The Mystics were the 3rd worst rebounding team in the league, and as you can see on this play, they just failed to box out Jonquel Jones after Sabrina Ionescu missed both of her free throws. Grabbed that rebound, and the Mystics would have forced the Game 3. However, that's not the case. They fall to 0-5 in the playoffs since winning the championship in 2019. Elena Delle Donne held to just 11 points for the 2nd consecutive game, while her teammate and fellow free agent after the season, Natasha Cloud, had a career-high 33 points. That's not just a postseason career high for her. That is a career high, period. And as I mentioned, Natasha Cloud and Elena Delle Donne are both free agents heading into the 2024 season, so the Washington Mystics could look a lot different next year, with only 4 players currently under contract: Brittany Sykes, Shakira Austin, Maisha Hines-Allen, and Ariel Atkins. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Capital Recap. God bless.